Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 469. All right, guys, welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise awareness of trauma and to support new trauma therapists just starting out on their trauma-informed journey. I do that through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. If you're a therapist of any kind, interested in learning about trauma, and you're looking for support and inspiration, I invite you to check out Trauma Therapist 2.0 by going to traumatherapist2.com. That's traumatherapist, the number 2.com. All right, let's get started. All right, folks, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Guy McPherson here. I am very excited to have as my guest today, Dr. Bonnie Badenoch. Bonnie, welcome.
Thank you so much. Very happy to be here. Thanks for asking.
Right. You are welcome. It's an honor. So Bonnie is a therapist, mentor, and author who delights in integrating the discoveries of relational neuroscience into the art of therapy. For 28 years, her work is focused on supporting trauma survivors and those with significant attachment wounds reshape their neural landscape to support a life of meaning, resilience, and warm relationships. At this stage of life, Bonnie enjoys mentoring those in the helping professions through offering longer-term immersion trainings in the embodiment of interpersonal neurobiology principles. Her books include Being a Brainwise Therapist, The Brain Savvy Therapist Workbook, and The Heart of Trauma, among others. Bonnie, it's been a while. It's been a long time. I mean, I've been trying to have you on this podcast for a long time, and I'm glad you're finally here. So welcome.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Before we get started, share with our listeners where you're from originally, and then where you're calling from, and we'll start doing it.
I was born and raised in Southern California and lived there my whole life until I was 65, and then have had the wonderful experience of moving into the Pacific Northwest. And now I split my time between Vancouver, Washington, and Port Townsend, Washington.
Okay, awesome. So let's just get into it here. You've been doing this a while.
Yes.
Give us, if you will, the kind of a sketch of your journey, how you got into this field.
Well, I got into it because I had a really terrible childhood and had no good therapeutic help till my early 40s. And I'd been teaching college and having breakdowns every few years and all of this because I had no real help in dealing with it. And then I got a wonderful therapist. And as a result of that, I decided I really wanted to change careers and provide for others what had been given me. And so I went and got a marriage and family therapist degree and we started a nonprofit organization in Irvine, California, where we worked with nothing but severe trauma. And did that for 17 years there, and then moved north and have been practicing up here since.
So you said you had a terrible childhood, as in abuse and trauma and the whole nine yards?
Very, very ill parents. My mother very mentally ill. My father very damaged by his childhood. And so my sister and I went through a lot as kids, and it left, as you know, big marks on us that really required expertise, but mostly true presence from someone so that our natural healing resources could begin to come to the surface.
At what point in your life did you realize that you needed or you wanted to get involved with therapy?
You mean for myself?
Yeah.
Well, I had tried several times to get involved in therapy, but it had been I would have a breakdown, and then I would couldn't function kind of breakdown. And then I would get with a therapist who could kind of help me rebuild my protections, but never ever got to the heart of the matter. So it was just waiting in the background all the time for the next breakdown. And then I'd find somebody else who kind of helped me be put back together. And then, so finally, in my early 40s, my father passed away. And in that process, I fell apart again. I had been pretty okay for about 10 years on the outside. And then I fell apart. And this time I happened to fall into the hands of someone who had both the understanding and the emotional capacity to really hold me through a significant recovery.
When you were, how old were you when you said, you know what, I need to see a therapist for myself?
Well, I'd actually been taken into a horrible therapy experience when I was 11, when I had a breakdown. And I think for myself, the only thing that drove me to it was I couldn't function. So it happened again. I mean, it wasn't like I was making conscious, healthy decisions like, I need therapy. It was like, I can't function. I need someone
Right.
to support me to live.
You,
So
you, the point you're bringing up here is, I heard you say, you needed someone who had the expertise, but maybe even more importantly, the presence. Talk about that. Because therein lies what this podcast is about.
that's right. I think that my own therapy taught me this to begin with. And then over time with others and doing other reading and having time with Dan Siegel and other people, that I've come to realize that it doesn't matter which techniques we like to use, which interventions we have. It's important to have some expertise. But the most important thing is to be able to truly hold a safe space for another person so that their natural healing capacity can begin to emerge. But it means we have to have a big capacity to hold a lot, because as these old memories come up, it's intense. And we have to be able to stay in a regulated state. We have to be able to provide this safety for the person to begin to really explore in a deep enough way. And we have to provide for them what it was that they didn't have as a child that they needed at the moment that these traumas occurred.
When you first encountered such a therapist, what was it like for you? What changed for you? What was that like?
Well, again, I was in the midst of a breakdown, so I kind of anticipated here'd be somebody else that would sort of put me together. But as soon as I was with him, I began to realize that something was stirring deeper inside of me that scared me, frankly, because it felt so powerful. And there was so much terror that began to well up in my body. But what I found was that when that would happen, I felt his presence even more, because I was more available. I was in a much more vulnerable state, and I would feel literally his energies and his care holding me and letting me go deeper and deeper into these wounds, and him providing the kind of steadiness and depth that I never had anywhere before with therapists, certainly never in my home. And so as I was safer and safer, I was more and more able to have these memories arise. And in the 6 years we were together, we met twice a week. And after a while, when comfort begins to come in, it's a powerful reason to go to therapy every week when you haven't had it. But it was his presence that allowed that opening to happen. I wasn't anticipating it would be like that because of all my other experiences.
At what point along the road, Bonnie, did you say to yourself, you know what, I want to turn around and I want to start helping others?
Probably about a year into my own therapy, I was beginning to think about that. And at 3 years in, I went back to school to get my master's in marriage and family therapy, and specifically to a school that offered depth work and this kind of thing, in a school that my therapist had recommended to me because they did offer that kind of work. And I knew that was all I really wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about 2 years in.
This topic of presence and authenticity, we use these words and I think they're easy to use, but when you get down to it, I mean, when you're sitting there with a bunch of clinicians, maybe they're newer clinicians, maybe they even have some experience and they want to listen to what you say, how do you talk to them about this? How do you say, this is the way one goes about cultivating or developing this presence?
Yeah, I think that there's two parts to it. One is, again, just what we said earlier, there's some importance of some real understanding about what creates safe presence. And this is where the neurobiology comes in. This is where we can begin to understand what it is about our neurobiology that makes for safety and what doesn't create safety. And so I turn to Steve Porges's work. He says connection is a biological imperative, and then he opens out for us how our nervous system, being in different states, provides safety or lack of safety. So I think we have to understand that to begin with. And then I think what's most important is that while I'm speaking, I'm in a safe state so they can feel it.
Mm-hmm.
So that they feel the resonance with that. Because what we know is then when we're with somebody whose system is having what Porges calls a neuroception of safety, which means it's kind of deep down embodied safety, But when we're in that state, it's an invitation to anybody who's around us to also enter a safe state. They may or may not be able to do it, but we become a safe landing strip. So the essence of that safe space is that we are feeling safe ourselves, and then we open a space that is without a judgment as much as possible and without our own agenda as much as possible, and is instead open to who this person is in front of us in this particular moment and relating to them.
And being able to create that safe space and be present in that moment requires what? The therapist
to be healthy themselves.
Say that again?
The therapist to be really attending to their own mental health and having their own support regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Because we build up a lot, just the world today, it has trauma to it, just being alive in this world today. And then we have volunteered to co-suffer with our clients. That's what we do in this work. We volunteer to co-suffer with them. And because our resonant circuitry is so powerful, we're going to be taking on to some degree what comes to us. And if we don't have backup of somebody who listens to us and cares for us, it's not good for us. It's very important that we also be being held. It's also important that the person who's holding us has their own holding. These layers of interpersonal care. We hear about self-care, and that's fine, but that's not the essence of who we are as human beings. We are interpersonal beings, and we keep our health by being able to relate to people, by people being safe for us as we're being safe for our clients. And it's rare. It's so rare when I go out and talk with people. I'll say, who's got your back? And I'd say at least 80% of people go, nobody.
Wow.
And that's so sad. And it's also harmful.
That's a really interesting point. So you're saying, yes, self-care is good, but that's not who we are. We are beings who operate and thrive in relationship. So we need that as much as I need to take a bath and, all that other good stuff too.
Yeah, more than the bath and the...
Right. Man. So let me ask you something. One of the questions I like to ask, and one of the questions that people really respond to, is talking to someone like yourself who's been doing this for a long time, asking them about kind of, mistakes or early clinical errors.
Yes.
What those look like for you. Can you share one with us?
I can, because it's very vivid for me. I started doing therapy as an intern probably about 4 years into my own therapy. And I'd been a person who I showed up twice a week unless I was dead. And I worked really hard. And my therapist would say, you can put down the pick and shovel now. You do not have to just dig this stuff out. And it's like, I'm not doing that. I did finally get the hang of it toward the end, but I worked really hard. So when I had clients coming to me, I had no respect for their pacing. I pushed them because I thought that was the way therapy should be done. In my early learner arrogance and also, inability to step into other shoes at that point very thoroughly, I know I pushed several people very early on right out of my office. And it's taken me, just by wanting them to do what I did. What I've learned now is to trust the other person's process, and that if I'm open and present and safe for them, then the pace that they go at is the pace that their system needs to go at, and that their system will show me and guide me. But that's taken me years to get to the place where I pretty much 100% trust that.
When you say you push them, I can imagine what that might be, but what does that look like for our listeners? Is that...
Well, I think I was pretty much in sympathetic arousal, trying to get something to happen for them instead of waiting. Now I know that I want to follow them, not lead them. Mm-hmm. My leading is by opening a space for them. And then as they offer to me, then I follow them and offer what I can. But in this case, I was coming in and I was trying to get them deeper and faster, and all of that. And it was very hard on some of them. A few of them responded well because they were built like me, to push through. And I did well with those clients from the beginning. But it took me a while and some really good supervision to be able to settle enough in myself to believe that the process could open much more correctly if I was following the other person's pace. So, but so what it looks like is we get anxious because we want something to happen and we start to push and start to take over the therapy. That isn't safe for the other person. If I'm in sympathetic arousal, I'm asking them to go into sympathetic arousal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not helpful at all.
You talked about techniques and the importance of that relative to the importance of therapists, their presence, and so forth. Talk a little bit about, I mean, there's so many modalities out there. How would you advise a newer clinician, or maybe even one with experience and wanting to learn about trauma? How do they wade through all of those to find something that is going to work for them? Are they all beneficial? Is anyone going to work for anyone else? What do you say to that?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to begin to get. This goes back to a problem we have in society as a whole. This isn't a rabbit trail I'm going down. I mean, this is just an important piece, I think. Ian McGilchrist is one of the people who's really helped me understand the two hemispheres of the brain. I don't know if you're familiar with Ian's work, but the left hemisphere is dominated by tasks and behavior and learning everything. The right hemisphere is the hemisphere that's open to new experience and open to another person. It's the relational hemisphere. Now, it's much more complex than this, but if we're not leading more with that right hemisphere relationship, it's not safe. But the left hemisphere is dominant in our society. So we think we have to learn all the techniques. We don't. It's not helpful. It's like having a toolkit without having any idea what it is you're doing with it. You pull something out and maybe it works. What's helpful is to find 1, 2, 3 things that really resonate with you as a clinician. Not only learn them, but embody them, do them yourself, have the experience of having that happen for you, whatever it is that does, and then being able, when the time is right, to offer it to your people. Anything we are offering from our own experience will have far more weight for people than if we're offering it because we know a technique. Anything that has steps to it and we just do it as a technique is not very compelling for other people. But if we have it embodied in us and we're offering it with that depth, then there will be a way that the other person will find their way. And so if we have 2, 3, 4 of those kinds of things, there's something in that range that's going to help everybody that we choose to bring into our practice.
When you got to a point where you said, I want to pursue a degree in therapy and become a therapist, was it with the idea that you wanted to work with people who'd been impacted by trauma?
Yes,
specifically?
100% for that, because of the help I'd gotten. Yeah, we said at our center, we had a sign over the door. It was invisible, but people seem to know, and that is, for other therapists, if you have clients you don't want to see, send them to us, and we'll do our best with them. So we worked with what used to be called the personality disorders. I guess they still are. I find it very disrespectful, but that's okay. But we worked with a lot of that, as well as what was called complex trauma and dissociative identity disorder, and very little else. Almost our entire practice was people who had really suffered.
When I got into graduate school, I just want to share a little story.
Yes.
Yeah, I was kind of an older student. I had dropped out of college initially and for 18 years, and then I went back. So I went back to graduate school at 36. And, I had been around the block. I knew I wanted to focus on trauma, and I had kind of been around the block and kind of had been in therapy and kind of felt like I had kind of done my own work, and I didn't really feel like I didn't need to focus on that. So when I got into school, it was all about, what book do I need to read? What workshop do I need to take? What's going to make me the best trauma therapist I could become? And it wasn't, honestly, Bonnie, and it wasn't that I didn't understand or I wasn't cognizant of the importance of presence. I knew that, but I didn't really understand its place within this work. And it wasn't really, honestly, until I started doing this podcast and exactly what you're talking about, and really you've articulated it beautifully, that this theme started coming out. Yeah, yes, of course, techniques are important, but your presence, the ability to hold that and create that safe space and to have done the work before you get into that room is of the utmost importance. to me, Bonnie, that statement is so crucial. And I think it doesn't always land easily for people, because I think it means, wait a minute, you're asking, I want to help people, but you're asking me, I've got to do this own stuff?
Ongoingly, too.
Ongoingly. And that's not easy.
No, it's not easy, but I think it's a great blessing, because our without even meaning to, our clients are going to open so many doors to our own healing that makes our life better. I get with a client, and whatever they're going through is touching and awakening in me something old, and I can turn around and have, at this point, I don't see a therapist regularly, but my partner's also a therapist, and she and I do a lot of work in the sand. So I can say something's up with me, and we go do sand tray work, which is one of my dominant working. And so it wouldn't even occur to me not to go and handle that. And my life is so much better for it. It's not a bad thing to heal. I mean, if we think it's a burden for us to be in our own healing process, what is that saying about therapy? I mean, I think it's life-giving, and it's life-giving in this kind of way that as we help others recover their lives, they're helping us recover our lives too, without them even knowing it.
You talked about being able to create a safe space, and talk more about that. What is it? Does this presence that we're talking about here, does this just simply come as a result of therapists, attending to their own healing?
Well, it's really helpful if you have a therapist in your own healing that's also creating a safe space so that you have the feel of it. But the biggest part of it is working on becoming with fewer judgments about people, and with greater trust that that person in front of you has everything they need to heal, if you can make the space big enough and follow them well. It's developing that trust over years and years and years. It deepens, to trust that there is within that person all these dynamic, healthy impulses that have been squashed by the trauma, but that will come to life as the trauma is relieved. And that our systems, I can't go into it here because we don't have the time, but we could literally go through all the systems in our body that are set up to aim toward healing once the support arrives. It's just remarkable. But this idea of judgments, we're supposed to have to assess, we have to make treatment plans, we're supposed to use evidence-based practice, all that's left hemisphere, non-relational stuff. And then if we add all the protocols and interventions we're supposed to know on top of that, you're now so left shifted that there's hardly any room to really be present. And so cultivating this sense of noticing when we are having a judgment, like our brain is assessing, like, is this an anxiety disorder or is this other thing? If we notice our left hemisphere doing that, to just assure it, we can think about that later and come back to actually being present to who's in the room now. There isn't a disorder in the room. There's a human being in the room. And they're just aching to have somebody really be with them.
That's pretty an intense statement. So there isn't a disorder in the room. There's a human being in the room. I mean, what you're saying is resonating with me, because I know when I was in my internship, that's exactly right. All these things, your wheels are going. What am I seeing? How am I going to fit this into what I've learned? Page what? Am I going to be able to diagnose this correctly? And it's the exact opposite of what I should have been doing, which was why is that challenging for a lot of therapists?
Well, because when we're in that state, it's a very tentative, unknowing state, because when we're in the right hemisphere, we're completely in the moment. We don't know what's going to happen next. And so there's a very tentative, possibly anxiety feeling, because we're not in control. We've given control over to them. So when we start to get scared, we want to grab on to diagnosis or some kind of technique or something so that our system calms down. And that's why I say having a really strong knowledge base is really helpful. And I don't mean knowledge of techniques. I think that what helped me the most was in 2003, I met Dan Siegel, and I really started to get to understand through interpersonal neurobiology and then spreading out to the other relational neurosciences how we function as human beings. And by doing that, over time, I've just, as I said, developed such compassion for people and such
Mm.
trust in their ability to heal, that having this kind of broad knowledge base of this neurobiological world has helped me be able to stay in the right hemisphere without getting scared and having to come back to find, solid ground in the left hemisphere of ideas.
I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Dr. Bonnie Badenoch. Bonnie, what is a good website, or where can people reach you?
Our website is nurturingtheheart.org, nurturingtheheart.org.
Okay. And I'll have everything linked up here at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. So I said in the introduction that you're at a point now where you're mentoring people. Talk about that. Talk about what you're doing now.
Well, really, we're doing two main things. I still have a few clients, but not so many anymore. A couple of years back. I'll be 77 in a few weeks. So it seemed like it was time.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Time to shift gears a little bit because, maybe I'll live a really long time and get to do this for a lot longer, which would be great. So at this point, we're doing two things. One is we do year-long training programs for therapists that are about interpersonal neurobiology, but they're about embodying it through your own experience. So they're 4 3-day weekends, and people come from all over and work together on really delving into their own world of attachment, their own world of implicit memory and all that, while really learning the neurobiology. So we love doing that because people get a felt sense of it that you can't get just reading a book or even doing a weekend kind of thing. So we do those, and then I do one-on-one consulting with people from everywhere, and I love doing that as well. And when in the consulting part, we talk certainly about case conceptualization and interpersonal neurobiology, but the question always comes back to, what are you experiencing when you're with this client? So it's kind of a combination of the person getting to have a sense of where their clients are taking them inside, as well as, what's unfolding and how we might understand based on the person's history, what might be going on with them and how to be present. And in that, I hope in all of those things that my partner and I really model this sense of listening and of welcome to every part of the person and all of that, so that they have that experience through us as well, both when we do consulting and also in the classes. So most of our time and energy is there. I'm not traveling to teach as much anymore and all of that. It's really lovely to be able to kind of stay at home. We do all of this out of our homes. And so,
oh, wow.
So it's lovely to have a house and a garden and a kitchen, and all the sand tray figures in the world for people to enjoy.
Wow. So where, I'm just looking on your website here, so under programs, I just want to make sure that I'll have these linked up for people. I mean, that sounds incredible.
Yeah, if people are interested, they should get in touch with us. We are completely full for 2020 and 2020.
Oh, wow. What?
And we have a pretty long waiting list for 2020.
Wow.
So, and I'll teach probably at least another 3 or 4 more years, provided my health holds out. But if people find this compelling, we'd love to hear from them and put you on the list to be informed when the next set of dates comes out.
Okay. Well, wow. Okay. I'll definitely have it on my website. We'll have your books listed as well. But in terms of, you mentioned Stephen Porges and Dan Siegel, of course. Can you recommend a kind of a go-to book, whether trauma related or not? What would you rate? What would you say?
Well, I'd recommend 2. One is The Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist. It's a very fat book, but you can read the first 4 chapters and the concluding chapter and be just fine. But he talks about these 2 hemispheres of the brain, and if you know something about Porges and you know something about McGilchrist, you'll get the felt sense of what we're talking about when we talk about presence. And again, I think that it's the foundation on which everything else rests. And then the other thing is how interconnected we are, not just with each other, but with everything, all the ecosystems. And I just read Richard Powers' The Overstory recently, and have never been so moved by a book that is kind of fully embodying this sense of interconnection.
Wow.
It's
Awesome.
such a powerful book. For me, it was anyway. It really brings home how much we need each other, and not just we humans, but we everybody.
Right.
all the beings on this planet. And so,
Right.
when we can come from that place and feel the value of that, I think it makes it easier to want to cultivate presence over technique.
Wow. Bonnie, it was an honor having you on here. I loved it. I want to thank you so much.
Well, you're very welcome. It's lovely to be here too. And it feels like a lovely resonance between you and me. So that's always the best.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye.